Hello indie game fans, October was another stacked month of releases where I have a whopping 32 titles and updates you might have missed in this video with an excellent top 10 if I do say so myself. So let's begin with Kill the Crows, The Crimson Moon, a free update to a hidden gem of 2023 which is an arcade style twin stick shooter in which you have the power to slow down time and tag enemies, then blast away at them like the cowboy from Overwatch, having one-hit kills even for bosses and is awesome. This update adds curses to the game, which are additional difficulty modifiers to increase the challenge, with the game's normal price being a very reasonable $5, so why not give it a go. I did know about the release of Ember Knight's Wrath of the Architect, but they did not have a gameplay trailer at the time, so here it is, being quite a substantial expansion of content as compared to the main game. The lore behind this update is that the creator of space and time, known as the Architect, upon sensing the danger that Praxis, the villain of the base game, posed to reality, decided to split it into two mirror dimensions, and it is in this altered world in which you are fighting your way through, with the fate of reality itself being at stake. The core game is an excellent pixel art action roguelite title, so this adds and expands upon that with new bosses, new enemies, 2 new weapons, 9 new skills and so much more, and in a player-friendly move, along with paid DLC comes a free update which includes 2 pets and 3 new game modes in Daily Dungeon, Boss Rush and Chaos Run, making this even better. This video is brought to you by Run from Mummies, an awesome looking action-adventure game with a twist in which you play as tourists exploring pyramids, but of course run into mummies and other enemies like ghosts and giant sandworms, having to avoid traps, outwit enemies, and solve puzzles in order to run for your life. Armed with only a camera, you can temporarily stun these supernatural foes to buy some time, interact with the environment to trigger traps to clear a path, emphasizing fast-paced decision-making and exploration. The many levels will have their own themes, secrets and challenges, and will also have both single player and co-op support, with the different playable characters having unique special abilities which provides replayability. I do like the hand-drawn art here, both in game environments as well as their cutscenes, with a nice addition of humor to the vibes as well. So if interested, the game just released this week, so pick it up via the link in the description below. I last mentioned this title in my video covering the best games for Halloween, and while the season has passed, HorrorVale has been deemed to be the Halloween-themed RPG, so it might be worth picking up, or at least wishlisting it in preparation for next year. This is an RPG adventure that invites players into a quirky and darkly humorous version of the underworld, where you play as Alice, a skeleton witch searching for her kidnapped pet Scruffy, who has been taken by strange and unusual monsters, befriending and recruiting up to 30 different party members along the way. In terms of gameplay, this is largely a turn-based JRPG with fun attacks and abilities, where exploration is equally important as you explore the world and uncover its secrets, with the hand-drawn visuals and especially the charming character designs being of note, and does also have a sense of whimsy that gives off Tim Burton vibes. This released out of early access after a couple of years where the developer didn't do incremental updates through early access, but rather saved everything for the 1.0 launch, so if you picked this up earlier, definitely go back, and if you did not, now's the best time to jump in.
Welcome to Liar's Bar, where trust is a gamble and deceit is the game.
Here's an interesting social deduction multiplayer title with a little bit more of a conventional gameplay element, in which anthropomorphic animals are sitting around a table in Liar's Bar and bluffing their way through the games, instead of having the more complex gameplay of titles like Among Us. The current version includes 2 games, Liar's Dice and Liar's Deck, in which you are declaring values and have to catch who is bluffing. It is simple in concept, and is a pick up and play kind of experience, where the accessibility has helped, since it has an astounding 12,400 Steam reviews as of recording, which translates to many copies sold.
And Outlast.
I first caught wind of PsiloSybil when it was still on itch.io, and even at the time, there was some amount of hype around this 3D platformer, now making the jump to Steam with the definitive release moniker. This is a classically designed linear level-based 3D platformer where you play as a plucky mushroom hero on a quest to defeat the master of all hogs, Lord Nutmeg, in order to free all of Shroomkind. This game pays tribute to the golden era of 3D platformers, and one marsupial game in particular, capturing the essence of the PS1 era games with its retro-inspired visuals. There are 25 unique handcrafted levels filled with traps and enemies, and of course, collectathon style design with plenty of secrets as well. So if you love games like this from the past, be sure to check it out. Another 1.0 release of interest is Potion Tycoon, a management simulation game where you take on the role of building and managing your own potion shop in a magical realm. You'll need to set up production lines to brew potions, mixing ingredients to satisfy the unique needs of your customers, from wizards to warriors, expanding and upgrading your operations along the way. Key to all of this is an alchemy system which allows for experimentation with various ingredients, and you have the option to run a dark, shabby magic shop for commoners, or to go high-end and run a luxurious potion mall instead, so there are options in the simulation as well. Managing resources and maintaining quality control is key to keeping your customers happy, especially VIP customers, since if you serve them well, your fame and reputation in the market will grow, which leads to pricing power, customer loyalty, and long-term prosperity. This comes to us from Snowhound Games, creators of the Darkest Dungeon-like Deep Sky Derelicts, whose art style has translated into this game as well, being a good title going under the radar, so check it out. Another runaway success in the survival game space is the non-violent The Planet Crafter, a game more about terraforming a planet to make it hospitable rather than punching trees and hunting dinosaurs, releasing the Planet Humble DLC, which gives you a whole new planet to explore. The world here is half the size of the original game's planet, but it is filled with diverse biomes waiting to be discovered. But the question lingers, why is this planet devoid of life? Your mission is to investigate this mystery, uncovering lore about the world and around space colonization and mega corporations, done of course through terraforming this new planet with new challenges to overcome, and has been well received for a DLC. One of the absolute monstrosities chugging along in early access is Timberborn, the beaver city builder, where these industrious creatures can build some rather magnificent looking structures and towns in the so-called lumberpunk world, and is tremendously popular, releasing the Wonders of Water update. This is also update 6, each of which have been impressive, with the main thing here being that water physics is now fully 3D, meaning that aqueducts to move water or even underwater cities are now possibilities. There are a bunch of additional structures that you can build, including vertical power shafts, automated sluices, and more, along with impermeable floors which water will not flow through, which increases the possibility space when it comes to designing your city and looks to become one of the best games in the space. Another awesome Vampire Survivors inspired title in early access is yet another Zombie Survivors, which allows you to control a squad of characters instead of just one, releasing the Re-Evolutions update, which is pretty significant. This revamps the old skill tree, splitting it into more new ones, differentiating between a general skill tree as well as more specialized options like damage versus elites, along with a new specialization system which gives each playable survivor their own skill tree. They have reduced the grind so that survivors level up by being on the team rather than having to be team leader, and also has ability evolution which exponentially increases their power, adding to the mayhem of this game, and is even better now. We also have the 1.0 release of Valkyrie of Phantasm, an aerial combat title that uses characters from the Toho project, but looks and plays like some sort of Gundam or Dragon Ball game. and might be of interest. Rather than dashing up to an enemy and punching them, this instead relies on projectiles and bullet hell-like combat, firing off projectiles while avoiding enemy attacks, which is similar to their vertical shoot-'em-up counterparts, although you do still have melee options if push comes to shove. It's kind of like a fighting game since you have abilities like an ultimate spell, as well as a meter system in the drive gauge to be triggered at critical times, and is pretty unique all things considered. I'm not usually a grand strategy war game kind of person, so forgive my ignorance, but ever so often, there comes along a title that is so popular that even I have to take note, with Age of History 3 being the specimen here. While minimalist in presentation, you are diving into the vast history of humanity from its earliest days to the future, exploring human history and seeing if you're able to alter the course of it. There is of course a tech tree to progress up, diplomacy with rival nations, as well as a reworked battle system, where of course army composition matters, and with over 63 unit types, we'll have plenty of variety. The previous entry in this series, Age of History 2, released in 2018, and has an astonishing 41,000 Steam reviews, and seems like the work of a solo developer, or at least a small team, who is secretly one of the most successful indie developers ever. I'm not into VTubers, of which this game is based on, but Flare NUINUI Quest sure looks cool, a throwback pixel art action platformer that stars a VTuber from HoloLive, where she wields her dual pistols and embarks on a quest to defeat evil forces who have unleashed chaos across the land. This is a solid looking pixel art title with some impressive dithering in the background, making the game look awesome. It reminds me a little bit of titles from days past such as Mega Man with the whole UI and look, where there will be other characters from the HoloLive universe in this, some of which will assist you, while others will challenge your skills in fierce boss battles. As you progress, you'll uncover hidden items, secrets and power-ups, all set to an 8-bit soundtrack featuring reimagined HoloLive tunes, which apparently is a thing, but again, even without context, I do think that it is worth a play. In addition to the main campaign, there are 2 additional ones where you play as 2 other VTubers, each offering a unique perspective on the story and distinct gameplay mechanics that differ from the main character, so it seems like pretty good value as well. Another update of interest is Kristala Chapter 2, the cat Souls-like RPG, which is currently in early access, adding a new ice clan in the Tundra, which have ice spells at their disposal. This adds a new necromantic biome, including 2 new wild areas and a new capital city, along with story content, more dangerous enemies and much more. This game had a pretty successful Kickstarter campaign, which I suspect is due to the presence of cats, with the parkour and movement options being different as compared to its more weighty Souls-like inspirations, and it's worth a look if you love games like this. A neat little Metroidvania is Stardust Demon, where you play as a character from a demon planet witnessing a catastrophic event that sent the universe into disarray, now having to uncover a mysterious evil plot to save the day. There are multiple planets to explore, which of course involves combat and puzzles, where you have a variety of abilities, from fiery breath to bombs that can stick to surfaces, and even teleportation for solving complex puzzles. Exploration is key, with hidden rooms and secrets waiting to be discovered, all wrapped up with some nice pixel art. Curiously, it does also have 3D CGI FMV cutscenes, which you see glimpses of in the trailer, and is kind of trippy and weird, appearing to be going under the radar, so perhaps give it a go.
Was it all a dream? Is it really my fault?
We also had the 1.0 release of Forgive Me Father 2, a very stylish, occult first-person shooter that is the sequel to a game from 2022. Although no prior knowledge is required, even if you are continuing the story of the priest character from the first game. The work is inspired by the eldritch horrors of H.P. Lovecraft, blending intense FPS action with some horror elements. The comic book-like art style is the highlight, which is mixed in nicely with the 3D environments, and if you ever got sick of shotguns and pistols in first-person shooters, do I have a treat for you. The weapons here include some mystical ones, twisted by eldritch powers, from weird-looking organs and tentacles on your weapons, which provides plenty of variety. Another 1.0 release of interest is Soul Stalker, a bullet heaven roguelite title in which you play as the steward of ghosts bound to eternal life on Earth, having to keep them in check by fighting off waves of apparitions. This game just looks so cute, and instead of a level select screen, does have a node-based map, so you are traversing from one region to the next, having meta progression in between runs as well. The Paper Mario looking art style is awesome, and is somewhat of a signature of developer Red Hood Advance, where they did have a rough go with their other game, The Outbound Ghost, due to a dispute with their publisher, but have since regained rights, so things are looking up for him. I first came across Goodboy Galaxy on Kickstarter, in which the most amazing thing about this sci-fi action platformer is that it was designed for the Game Boy Advance or GBA, which is interesting to say the least. They've nailed it in terms of look and feel, down to the pixel art, the level of camera zoom and more, while hero Maxwell hyper jumps to new locations in a desperate bid for help as his homeworld is nearing collapse. This is not a Metroidvania, but the levels do have multiple routes with special abilities to gain and upgrades for your blaster, along with secrets and boss battles. Most interesting, however, is that there are 50 plus characters to get to know and help, earning their friend card in the process, so there is a collectathon element to it as well, so if you love the GBA, definitely look into this. The sequel to Mining Mechs from last year is unsurprisingly named Super Mining Mechs, taking the same core gameplay loop and expanding upon it. This mining adventure has the Steamroll Dig kind of gameplay loop, where you're digging deep into the earth, collecting materials, bringing it back to the surface to sell, and then to purchase upgrades so that you can dig deeper and faster, all with a simple but effective pixel art style. There are plenty of upgrades and even 8-player co-op support, which is many, not to mention 3 planets with dozens of different locations to dig and explore as you try to find suitable replacements for natural resources that Earth once had which are now depleted. And it's a pretty chill kind of game, especially in single player. We also had the 1.0 release of the Black Grimoire Cursebreaker, a third-person open-world RPG that is inspired by titles like RuneScape and Ultima Online, having a little bit of Diablo influence as well, but leans more on the MMO side of things, even if it is a single-player only experience. The throwback visuals are nostalgic and do remind me of RuneScape, with the open-ended nature of the world being somewhere that you could easily get lost for hours in. There is a crafting skill system, so the more you do an activity, the better you get at it. And even though it is a single-player game, apparently there's some sort of social multiplayer component where you can see other players in town, but interactions are limited to chat and inspecting equipment only, although being a more obscure indie game where there are about 170 people playing right now as of recording, I don't know what the odds are that you will run into another player, but it does still look pretty neat. Another 1.0 release of interest is Keeper's Toll, a pixel art bullet heaven inspired roguelite in which you take on relentless hordes of monsters, but does have a more developed boss element, where there are handcrafted bosses to battle with unique attack patterns and challenges. Still, it does hit many of the beats of a Vampire Survivors style game and is pretty well done here, with the main issue being that there are just way too many of them, so maybe this doesn't stand out, but you could be doing much worse than this. Speaking of Vampire Survivors style games launching in 1.0, that is exactly the same scenario here with Slime 3K Rise Against Despot, a game that does have a little bit more of a pedigree since it is from the developer of Despotism 3K and Despot's game, but rather than meddling with pink humans or using them in auto-battler combat, you are instead directly attacking them as a murderous slime. This has their signature pixel art style and color palette, which, side note, is something to consider if you're an indie developer, and as compared to other titles in the genre, does seem to throw a lot more enemies at you due to their relative size, and it's a good one of these, so check it out. A smaller title that you might have missed is Unmasked, an inner journey, an emotional adventure platformer whose story is told without words. You play as the manifestation of a restless mind having to journey to find closure and peace, which largely translates to moving from left to right, but also involves platforming, puzzles and combat, where the latter is not super involved, so don't go expecting massive skill trees and progression. But if you want a small, shorter experience that is rather indie games, this might be of interest. The top 10 begins with Balatro Friends of Jimbo 2, the second cosmetic pack that changes up the art on the cards, this time including Cyberpunk 2077, The Binding of Isaac, Slay the Spire and Stardew Valley. And while there are no gameplay effects, it is nice to be able to select the aesthetic of your choice, along with some other cosmetic changes like the shopkeeper from Slay the Spire, and my god, how big has this game gotten in the short 8 months or so since release. The cozy city builder Gogo Town is pretty cute and cozy, so it wasn't a surprise to see that they announced a crossover update with Dinkum, the Australian farming sim that is pretty popular as well, with this update for Gogo Town adding new recipes, NPCs, props, a new feature in Wandering Traders, a new vehicle based on a wombat and more, and is pretty much the perfect pairing between the two. Speaking of cozy games, the release of Mika and the Witch's Mountain in August didn't go as expected for a game with that amount of hype, which I suspect is due to the early access labeling, but the developers are hard at work and just released the Churros and Cats update. There's a new NPC in town who has a chocolate and churros business, wanting to start an innovative home delivery service for his food, but needs to get it delivered quickly before the chocolate gets cold. So I wonder who would be the perfect fit for that. This sets up 7 circuits which you need to complete as quickly as possible, showing your mastery over the broom, as well as a Save the Kitties minigame where you have to collect cans of food and track down the cats to feed them, along with new cosmetics and even a companion that will fly with you, making this even better. One of the most significant 1.0 releases of the month is Diplomacy is Not an Option, a strategy, city-building, defense, survival title having one of the most impressive-looking combat since it allows for up to 25,000 units to be on screen, so definitely check if your PC can handle this. You play as a lord in a medieval fantasy world, having to make critical decisions that result in either prosperity or annihilation. There's a core city building element to get your economy up and running, having to balance the needs for food, housing and military might depending on how you allocate resources. Defenses like walls and towers are a necessity since your city will come under siege, and will be of interest to players who enjoy games like They Are Billions. The low poly art style is alright and gets the job done, where the massive battles against massive armies are the highlights of the game. In addition to the campaign mode, which does have a main narrative, there's also sandbox and challenge modes to provide variety and endless gameplay options, and is up there among the best releases of the year. I did cover the release of Blasphemous 2 Mea Culpa, a paid DLC to the brutal pixel art Metroidvania, but at the time, they only had a teaser and no gameplay trailer, but that has since been rectified here. This adds the Mea Culpa sword from the first game back into this, bringing with it savage attacks, devastating combos and special abilities that enhance the combat experience. There are 2 new bosses who stand as formidable gatekeepers, challenging your mastery over the combat systems, along with 2 new large zones, each teeming with secrets and new enemies, along with an alternate ending. It also includes new resonances, abilities, prayers, and rosary beads, giving you more options, and like Ember Knight mentioned at the start of this video, they also released a free update to the base game named True Torment, which adds a new game plus mode and more content for the base game, which is player friendly, even if there are complaints about the balance of the DLC content and enemy design, which the developers are rapidly working to fix, so perhaps a mixed bag with this one. We also had the release of Slay the Princess on consoles along with physical editions, where this horror-tinged visual novel was a standout from last year, now having the subtitle The Pristine Cut, which is a free update to the PC version. In this dark, choose-your-own adventure game, you are tasked with killing the princess in order to save the world, but things quickly get weird, but the voice acting in this game really is something else. The update expands the game by about 35%, adding more stuff to the Fury, the Den, and the Apotheosis, 3 brand new princesses, an entirely new ending, an interactive gallery, improved subtitle support for multiple languages, and more, literally adding thousands of new voice lines and illustrations, along with 17 new music tracks, so now's a time as good as any to pick this up. Multiplayer-focused titles are like Feast or Famine on Steam, either having not enough of a player population to sustain it, or just ending up so massive that it becomes a huge hit, which is where web fishing finds itself. While the core activity that you're doing in this game is fishing, the main appeal of it is that it is a multiplayer chat room, so you can chill out and talk to people and friends while keeping busy with the fishing, with the cute animals certainly adding an Animal Crossing-like charm to the game, where in a mess of Discord servers that modern video game communications is done through, this gives quite a different vibe, which is why it resonated with players. One of the best games of 2023 is Wandering Sword, a Chinese wuxia-themed pixel art RPG with both real-time and turn-based combat options, where post-launch in September 2023, they promised to continue to release updates to the game, with the latest named Echoes of Ash and Dust. This is a major content update which adds a new storyline as well as new creatures like Extreme Difficulty Mode through the Inheritance Library as well as the 5 Elements Challenge, and is shaping up to become one of the best as well. Speaking of one of the best, the isometric pixel art action roguelite Dead Estate released in 2021, and even then, the developers planned for 6 major content updates, all for free, and 3 years after release, we are finally here with the final update named Good Night. The previous 5 updates already added plenty of new content, from new levels to enemies and more, and this update is no different, adding a new ending route with 3 full floors, a new optional floor, 70 new items, which brings the final count to 300, up from 150 in the original release, 31 new weapons for a total of 150, up from 67, 10 new challenges, 56 new medals, new beach costumes for all characters, and so much more, being a labor of love which the developer has been rewarded for, so good on them, and again, now that it's complete, would be a great time to buy it if you have not. Developer Jonas Tyroler is absolutely killing it, whether as part of Grizzly Games, who made Superflight and Islanders, or as a solo developer on Will You Snail, or even as a YouTuber with over 200,000 subscribers, where he is back with Grizzly Games for this release in Throne 4, which released out of early access and unsurprisingly is killing it once again with over 16,000 Steam reviews as of recording. This is a minimalist defense RTS where you control a single player character on a horse, having to move the character to a location in order to interact with buildings or to construct defenses, building in the day and fighting off waves of enemies at night. There is a main story mode with 10 levels, but each level has multiple difficulty levels, where you have perks and upgrades to customize your skills and abilities, and once you are done with the main campaign, there is a roguelite mode with randomized waves of enemies which results in replayability. Why this works is that the game intentionally simplifies it down to a single player avatar, which reduces the number of variables that you have to control like in a classic RTS, so less micro and macro, but still retains what makes games like They Are Billions fun, as you test your defenses against hordes of enemies, so it's an excellent title that is potential Game of the Year material. Speaking of which, watch this video for the best games of 2024 so far.
Format. That's all you need to know for now.